Kevin S, you've been waiting patiently here. Kevin, what's your take? I watched you this morning on Good Morning Britain with two of the parents. A very incredibly powerful, moving interview. And you were kind of wrestling, I could see, with your heart saying one thing, your head saying another about this.
That's right. I put myself in the shoes of the parents, Barnaby's parents, and I would feel cheated by the system. But I think where it went wrong is not in the sentence, because he will be locked away forever. And I visited a secure mental hospital before. You have to go 5, 6 checks, just like you're going into a prison. I think it's why was he free anyway when he'd been sectioned 4 times and there were warrants out for his arrest and the police hadn't picked him up. I think that is the failure, not the verdict, not the judge saying it is manslaughter through diminished responsibility.
OK, but Esther, I mean, when you hear that when the public hear that this guy's pleaded guilty to attempted murder, but then is not found guilty of the ones he murdered, in my estimation, I think they're entitled to be pretty bemused by what the law has done here.
And I think
Dora is completely correct here. That is the law.
Yeah.
But the law seems to me to be inexplicable.
I mean, that's what I really struggled with. How can someone who travelled from London, prowl the streets of Nottingham for hours, not be convicted of, premeditating this attack? But I listened to the judge's comments, and he spent 33 minutes explaining it, and he testified on behalf of the 5 psychiatrists that said this man is suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. I think we also have to consider the fact that he's a danger to prison inmates as well as prison wardens if he did go to prison. I think the only justice any parent whose child has been murdered would be for the person to be hung. But in this country, we don't hang people for having a mental illness. And that's the really difficult thing to take from this. The fact that this person is so mentally unwell that he'll have to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Imagine if he becomes cognizant of what he's done. He might even wish he was hung because he couldn't live with himself.
Well,
he murdered 3 people.
The difference, of course, about being in one of these institutions, Kevin, he will be mandated to take all his medication. They will make sure he does, which, by all we know about him, when he took the medication, he was relatively normal, right?
And there's a great failure in so-called care in the community, that people are really basically left on their own.
Yeah. And
this guy was obviously frightening, obviously terrifying to other people, and obviously a danger. But the end result is he will not be on the streets. He will be detained. Do we really think people with severe mental illnesses should be put in prison?
And you know what's even worse?
I know, but I really am with the parents.
If the CPS had gone ahead with the murder charge, they would have lost, and then they would have to have a retrial and put the parents through more years of the slow, clunky British judicial system. And I don't think that's fair either. Lucy Letby, for instance, the parents got a knock on the door in 2018 that someone may have murdered your baby, and then it went to trial in 2023. That's 5 years of agony. Imagine if the trial wasn't as meticulous as it was, and they had to go through another 5 years of that agony. And I think they've actually saved the parents. I know it doesn't seem that way, but they've saved the parents.
Well, let me bring Chris back in here, because the chairman of the Criminal Bar Association, Tana Adkin case, he said that court backlogs and a lack of barristers meant the reasons for the different outcomes were not explained to the families, which seems to me absolutely shocking, shameful actually, that these poor families were completely unaware that this was all going on behind the scenes until right at the last minute.
Well, if that's the case, of course, it's utterly, it's a complete failure of the justice system. But the point that was being made by Tana Adkins is a very good one. The truth is that the waits for justice are almost indefinite. Those who have been raped are waiting on average 4.5 years to give evidence against their attacker, if they can make it that long. 4.5 years is the average, Piers,
That's
for
outrageous.
a rape trial, to get to trial after charge. And that because the system is, as Tana Adkins made clear, there are nowhere near enough specialist barristers. You can imagine the skill and sensitivity it takes to either defend or prosecute in a rape case. There are simply nowhere near enough of them left because the government starved the system of funding for well over a decade, and many, many people left the profession. And so victims pay the price every single day in our system. And sadly, in cases like this, murder cases and other cases, whether it be rape or other sorts of serious violent offences, the prosecutors simply don't have enough time to sit for an hour or two or three. Frankly, if it were in a counsel of perfection, Piers, in a case of this kind, I would have wanted to sit with the family for an entire day and listen to every single problem that they had with the decision, justify it and explain it properly. And that didn't happen, and that's a breakdown of the system.
I mean, Kevin, on every level, these families have been let down by a system that has just not been fit for purpose here.
No, and it's callous and it's cruel, and there they are. They're just treated as spectators while they've lost a loved one. Look, they should be taken through every step and involved. It has to be explained, and maybe they'll object at times. You would understand that. You have just had your life totally changed in the most gruesome and horrific way. But the system is broken. It is. It's absolutely broken.
About it, if you take your child to a specialist and say, my child has depression, they have to wait over a year just to see someone. So if you think about the lack of medical health resources that we have in this country, it's no surprise that someone like this, 2 weeks before when
Chris just said about a 4.5-year average wait for a rape case.
Well, there's no justice, and that will explain why very few rape cases ever result in a conviction. Because people give up, they despair, they don't want to bring the claim in the first place. Look, the system is broken.
When the
it's
system
smashed.
works,
You've got to make it work.
It works. I absolutely stand by the British judicial system. I think when it works, it works. It's just slow and clunky and underfunded. And unfortunately, I think the prosecution knew this and they wanted to save the parents years of agony.
And you know what? The British public, I can tell you, they're going to feel the same way the families have felt. Which is betrayed at every level by the system, but also inexplicable that he can be simultaneously convicted of attempted murder, but not of murder. No one's going to understand that. I'm sure that is the law. I know it's the law. Chris has confirmed it's the law. It's just the law's an ass. Because if the public can't understand something that simple, then it has to change. I just don't think anyone can hear that and go, what? It makes no sense. And if I was one of those parents, I'd be furious.
Murder is intentional killing. I mean, Chris Stall explains this better. It's intentionally going to kill somebody. Manslaughter is unintentional.
Well, what's attempted murder then?
Well, you attempt to kill somebody, but you don't do it. But if
but you're deliberately attempting to kill them.
Why isn't there a case of murder by, sort of...
I mean, I thought it would be
you're mentally ill as you do it.
But traditionally, it would have been a murder case, and the mitigating factor would be his mental health issue.
Yes.
That's what most people would expect.
Well, let me ask Chris one final question. What is to stop, Chris, somebody who's just a killer, playing the mental health card, saying, I'm a paranoid schizophrenic? I mean, what's to stop them doing that?
Well, I'll tell you what's to stop them. There's two things. Firstly, both the prosecution and the defence get expert reports from not one, not two, but a total of 5 of the most senior forensic psychiatrists in the country who deal with psychotic patients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Secondly, there's a High Court judge who has to make the overall decision. He weighs all of that evidence and he considered very carefully whether there was a possibility. He explicitly referred to it. Is it possible that he's, as it were, swinging the lead, or that somehow this is fabricated? And the judge said the possibility of that was so slim that it was not even worthy of consideration because of the expert opinion from so many different places. But you do make a good point, Piers, which is that you do need intent to kill to commit attempted murder. Right. And so I can well understand why people are confused, because actually the defence of diminished responsibility should be available to both.
Makes absolutely no sense to me, and I'm sure not to many people. But Chris, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much. To Kevin, Esther, thank you very much. And our hearts go out to all those poor families. I can't think of anything worse in the world than what they've had to endure. Absolutely horrific. And the fact the system let them down so badly, and the fact they end up with not even a murder conviction is, to me, completely wrong.